Hey everybody, welcome back to the comment show. So as you guys know, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I talk about whatever the hell comes to mind that I feel like talking about. And then on Thursday, I look at the best comments I've received the first 3 days of the week. And then I try to address a couple of my favorites from each one in today's show. And you may have noticed that I didn't do any videos this week. And the reason I didn't do any videos this week was because I was on vacation all last week. And since I do all my videos a week in advance, I didn't get around to doing any videos this week. So I was hoping maybe I'd find some time in the week to kind of like drop things in before I went to work every day, but that didn't happen. I slept in late. I suck at life. So there you go. Professionalism is my modus operandi, as you can clearly tell. However, I did say that I was going to do a comment show on last week's video since I didn't get a chance to do that either, since I do that on Saturday, and by Saturday I was already in vacation mode. So I'm going to do that here so we can at least get that done, and fuck you if you were mad about it. So Monday we talked about World War Wallet, Activision throwing in crazy loot box bullshit into Call of Duty World War II. And we got a comment from Dokaboo811 who says, "This is just an advertisement. By showing you products the game provides, there might be something cool in that box you now want, which is an incentive to buy loot boxes. There's nothing that says you need to buy a loot box, you can very easily earn loot boxes. The same loot box system is in Overwatch and Battlefield where everything is purely cosmetic." There is nothing that forces you to buy loot boxes, that's correct. However, I feel like you have said right here in the comment exactly what my problem is. By showing you products the game provides, there might be something cool in that box you now want. There's no requirement, but they are absolutely baiting the hook. And by giving you in-game rewards for looking at other people buy stuff, they're giving you a reason to put yourself in a position to bait your own hook to make you spend money. This is manipulation. Now, it's not like, they're not like forcing you to do it, but they are absolutely preying on your human kind of brain's have and have-nots and just way it's wired to want things that you see. So it's putting you in a situation where you're playing their game and you want to do as well in their game as possible and have cool stuff. And this obviously doesn't work for everybody, but there are people predisposed to being like, to having addictive personalities. This is why gambling is such a huge problem. So you're putting these people in front of a slot machine and saying, hey, this is pretty cool, right? And then people who have a predilection to this shit are just gonna blow tons of money to get all this stuff. So, you know, a lot of people are just like, it's cosmetic, it doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter from a game balance perspective. But in terms of like manipulating people who have a weakness to this, or just like putting what is essentially, you know, a slot machine in your game and now throwing it in people's faces and tempting them, I think that's a problem. I think that's an ethical problem. And some people may disagree with me with that, but I think the more that companies do this, the more that we have these like gambling systems in games, I think eventually someone's going to have to step in and start regulating it, because again, like all these big game companies are essentially having little mini casinos in their AAA releases that children are playing, and there's no oversight right now, which I don't know, I feel like we're on a slippery slope, and that's some weird shit that I'm not too comfortable with. So while from a game balance perspective, I have no issues with cosmetic items because it doesn't affect the balance of the game, from just a manipulation perspective and like, are we treading into gambling territory, which has been regulated before because it's a problem, that's where my issue with loot boxes in general comes from, whether they're cosmetic or not. On Tuesday, we talked about big businesses and how they have an ethical responsibility or don't have an ethical responsibility to be politically neutral or to just use their power responsibly. And the first comment we got was from Jefferson Estevam. My apologies if I butchered that. He says, "Fuck regulations, my dude. What we need is not a way to make companies smaller or weaker, but to support different companies to give them what they want." And on the other hand, we had later analysts said, I totally agree. I've had the opinion that we should somehow regulate companies that essentially have a monopoly for a while now. And while there's probably not that much extremely unethical stuff going on right now, the mere fact that they have the power to do that is very concerning. And, you know, I kind of agree with both of you guys. I'm not a huge fan of weakening the powers of corporations or business. When I see government regulations on business, I don't really care so much about the damage it does to quote unquote, it does to corporations. My concern is always in small business because A, I'm trying to build a small business, and B, small businesses and business in general is the way the individual in America and in other westernized countries that hold like similar economical structures to us, that's how you gain power. If we didn't have the ability to build businesses and grow and become bigger than what we are as just an individual, and we didn't have the ability to grow our influence and grow our economic footprint, we would all be subservient to the government. So I guess that's kind of the problem with something like socialism or communism. It's an equalizer and nobody can build themselves up. So you're all completely subservient to government interest. And so that's where I always feel like in our country, especially in America, there's this tug of war going on between business and government. And neither side is particularly right. But if you're going to like twist my arm over which one I trust more, I trust small businesses because these are a small group of people. Small businesses are essentially the modern version of tribes. So you have a small group of people who are all working together to accomplish a shared goal, which is make the business thrive. They all have personal investments in it. You know, it's enabling their livelihood. And because they're smaller, everybody usually kind of like has some sort of degree of interaction with each other. Like if you're in a small business and it's like 15 people, you know the founder of the company. And so there's the ability to have like ethical consideration for everything you're working around isn't disintegrated because the founder of the company who makes all the big decisions at the end of the day has personal interactions with everybody, and everybody working for them has a name and a face, and you're not just a number on a spreadsheet. Whereas when you get to something corporate sized, this ability to have ethical consideration for everyone you're working with disintegrates because it's impossible. When you have millions of employees, it just becomes a statistic. You can't envision it anymore. And so I think that's where a lot of the corporate bullshit comes from, because corporations become so bloated and big that they can't, it's literally impossible for the human mind to have ethical consideration for everybody at that scale. You have to like actually take a step back and try and consider it logically. It's not a feeling anymore. You have to think ethics. You can't feel it at that scale. And that's where a lot of the problems comes from, because when you're not feeling it intrinsically, you're just thinking about yourself, and then you make decisions that's best for the shareholders at the expense of everybody else who's actually keeping your business going. So in that regard, I feel like regulations are needed because there's no requirements or necessity to have any ethical consideration on big corporate scales. And that's where corporate collusion and corporate bullshit comes from. But on the other hand, the government is just as bad in the other direction. The more regulatory power we give to government over business, the more of our ability to fight the government erodes. Because every limitation we put on business, we're putting on ourselves if we started a business. And once the government becomes too powerful, we can't veto them or have anything to do with it. But at the same time, if the government's doing something good, we also have big corporations lobbying to get them to stop doing it. So it's this back and forth. And the big problem, again, is what I said in the video. It's not a problem with companies. It's not a problem with government. It's a problem with human beings and our inability to act in a way that's good for everybody, but we're just trying to look out for ourselves at the expense of everybody else around us. And when you get a company that is worldwide and massive, when they're not looking out for everybody using their product, they're fucking over everyone in the connected world. And that was kind of my point. So I'm not a huge fan of regulations, and I'm not a huge fan of just letting businesses go run wild, because while we're looking at a lot of regulatory problems right now, on the flip side, if we didn't have regulations, every advertisement would have subliminal messages in it, and all food products would contain nicotine. So like there's no business reason not to run subliminal messaging in your advertisements. It's an ethical problem. And if you don't care about ethics, then you don't care about using blatant manipulation like that in your advertisements. And there's no business reason not to put an addictive substance in your food products to force people to continue buying it. That's good for your bottom line. But it's the ethical problem that makes people not do it. And because businesses don't care about ethics, both of those had to be regulated away so they didn't fuck over the consumer. And that's where government comes in. Government is this outside perspective that can look into business practices and keep it under control, whereas businesses are a way to kind of give individual citizens that don't have anything to do with the government a platform to interact with the government on a plane that actually affects them. So I feel like they're both necessary evils, but we need to find a better balance. And then on Wednesday, we talked about Star Wars, got a little bit more lighthearted, and talked about how fucked up it is. Hugo XGC said, yeah, I'm with you on this, man. They want me to believe that this prominent, serious thing got long forgotten as BS only 20 years later, when people in real life still can't get over cartoons from 30 years ago. Or film franchises from 30 years ago. But on the flip side, we have Top GM saying, you bring up some really good points, but look at it this way. 10,000. That's roughly the number of Jedi before the Purge. 10,000 on a planet of 1 trillion. Your average person hears stories of Jedi and knew that they were involved in the Republic, just like we hear stories of wizards and dragons. They are an ancient religion the same way as Judaism or Zoroastrianism. I don't even know what religion that is. They're still practiced but have ancient roots. Well, that's the whole thing, is that like it's difficult to kind of make an apples to apples comparison in terms of like how this information is distributed when you have something of a galactic scale versus just one planet. And like even Coruscant yourself saying has a population much higher than Earth does. So like when we start like delving into that kind of reasoning, it's like, yeah, it's easy for that stuff to get kind of lost in the shuffle of like a much more complicated system. But then at the same point, they have way more technology. They should be way more interconnected if you're able to have a system of commerce that expands, through an entire galaxy and not just one planet. So like how much of this information isn't known? 10,000, that's not a lot of people in a planet of 1 trillion, agreed. But then again, like we don't think that celebrities don't exist here. There's only like a handful of them compared to the population of the planet. And it's not like if they all went away 20 years later, we'd be like, yeah, John Wayne, he's real. He really existed. They're in the spotlight enough that we understand that these people, despite being a small selection of the species itself and like the population, they're real. They exist. And I feel like when you have a technologically advanced society like that, there has to be a way for people to know who they are and what they do. And even if like people think the Force is bullshit, to think that people like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo didn't exist when they're prominent historical figures who served a massive purpose in the world. It's like saying Winston Churchill and Adolf Hitler or whatever didn't exist because it's been like 70 years since they did their shit and we've just forgot about them. They're just like fictional characters now. They're clearly not. So we remember those things. We know people that existed hundreds of years ago. So it just seems weird that in 20, 30 years, all these historical figures had made massive contributions to reshaping the political landscape of an entire galaxy faded away into nothing. It just feels like a way of like mirroring the fact that in A New Hope, everything kind of seemed mystical until Luke started exploring it. So I don't know. This is a really stupid conversation. It has no point in anything at all, but what are you going to do? So that's all I got for this week's comment show. Thank you everybody for commenting. Continue to comment. I am not on vacation next weekend, so this Saturday I will record my 3 vlogs like normal. I'll have 3 more videos next week. So I hope you enjoyed your break this week. I know commenting takes a lot of effort, so I gave you a week off like I gave myself a week off. I'm just that generous of a guy. I'm just that nice of a person. You're welcome. You're welcome I gave you a break. No commenting this entire week. You can rest your tired fingers. Thank you for commenting. You're welcome for taking a break. But you better be back next week because I'm going to be back too. Have a good one, guys. Talk to you next week.